So why is it a myth that brain fog is just a normal part of aging?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what we were just all the things we just said, right? None of that other than normal hormonal decline, which again, most women are candidates for HRT if they want it. And there's lots of ways to do it. And that's what I educate on in my, clinical practice, private, one-on-ones with people and stuff too. But that is part of it. Like men lose hormones. Like it's normal to lose function of certain parts of your body, but everything else we talked about is a controllable, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm getting older. No, that has nothing to do with this. Like your brain can be sharp. We see it. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that have super sharp brains as they age and into the very end of their life, but it
Yeah.
is a signal. And so things like, and again, we can talk about this more, but like labs, we'll get to, I'm sure, but looking at thyroid, like a full thyroid panel, looking at your B12 levels. B12, I always tell people it's one of those with B vitamins, you kind of just pee out what you don't use, so you're not going to be toxic. But B12, we know people take those lozenges to feel more energized. B12 is kind of it's an energy thing, right? So you can look at your B12 levels in your blood. You can look at things like iron is a huge, huge one. Like fatigue. If I hear someone come to me that has fatigue, especially a woman, I'm immediately starting with like a few things, like the thyroid, iron, and some nutritional things. And then of course, sleep is a big piece of this when it comes to aging. Sleep does, from some of the studies I've read, and this could be, it's not, I don't have them like to pull up here, but sleep, as we age, we do actually tend to like lose some of the quality of our sleep normally, and even the necessity of a certain amount. So
Mm.
it's kind of interesting because I feel like I remember my grandma being like, yeah, like I sleep, but then I'll wake up and I'll put in my little, walkie-talkie, whatever, or Walkman she would put in and listen to like prayer and, worship music. But like, it's like they seem to just, older people seem to have less structured sleep. Maybe they even seem to need less, but I don't know. I can't tell you why that is. But, and then of course the hormonal shifts that we have in like midlife are going to affect this. So all the stuff we talked about, the foundation, it's not just aging. You really do have to think of it as kind of a warning sign and just start to check the boxes, even for yourself, is like, what could be at play here?
So how do our stress hormones play a role in brain fog and making it worse?
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of know that stress, they know cortisol as the stress hormone, which is interesting because I love the deep dive that Andrew Huberman did on cortisol because he really sort of doesn't like people calling it the stress hormone. It's more like an energy hormone. So, and I like that. I think that actually makes sense here too, because essentially your body has to hurry up and create energy. And so we can think of it as like, yes, that can be driven by stress, but not always, right? So like getting up in the morning, you want high cortisol in the morning. You
Mhm.
have to get up and alive and be like awake, right? But let's
Mhm.
just call it the stress hormone for today for fun because it's kind of what everyone knows. And so when that stays high, your brain really is more in that survival mode, like fight or flight. And so when you're doing that, you're like, go, go, go. Oh my gosh, there's something to run away from, the tiger, and it's not going to prioritize these other functions like memory and focus. That's why when you're super overwhelmed and stressed out, you really kind of forget things, even simple things. Um, this is another thing where there's like correct ways to say this, and I'm not going to bother to be so on point with the biochemistry, but let's just say it steals from other hormones. And we can look at that from a hormonal like creation, lens, or we can just look at it as it's stealing nutrients, it's stealing reserves and energy, and then your body doesn't have that to actually put toward hormones, right? So it's not, there's some other like misnomers around the field that we won't get into because it's a little, it's not important to talk through today, but it's really important to know that stress is going to negatively impact all hormone creation. And I always, when I work with someone too, I always like to, acknowledge the fact that women in midlife, like midlife time, we kind of call them the sandwich generation because they're like dealing with aging parents. They're dealing a lot of times with children, right? Then they've
Mhm.
got their own like awesome hormone problems. And sometimes their kids are going through puberty and they're basically going through the reverse puberty. So it's like this, I can't imagine being a mother with a teenager daughter, like at the same time, especially a daughter, because that's more obvious. So anyway, the stress piece, there's a lot of ways to manage stress. There's a lot of ways to address it. But even if you just start with like not meditating, like not, the things that sound fluffy and no one really wants to do, like things like blood sugar, like eat enough food, like get enough protein, get outside once every day for a little bit of time, little things like that. Those are stress management. Those things are stress relievers.
Okay, what about supplements, or natural supports that you might consider for mental clarity? You see so many different things on TV and, when you go to the store, but, what do you find really, it works and is supportive?
Sure. I mean, I don't, you probably know this by now, but I don't love to give like blanket recommendations for supplements. So what I'm going to talk about real quick is just things that I feel like are pretty much 100% of the time safe for everyone, that I don't need to look at your labs necessarily to tell you if it's a good idea or not. So magnesium, everyone's deficient. It's always a good idea. I love glycinate forms for this, specifically for the nervous system and sleep. Omega 3s. So you can get that from food if you're eating 4 to 5 servings of like wild caught fatty fish a week, but that's typically not what people are doing. And of course, we have all kinds of things to consider with the quality of the food, but those are going to be important for brain health, those, healthy anti-inflammatory omega 3s. And you can definitely consider like a B vitamin supplement to kind of almost like a shorter term boost, if you will. And, I like adaptogens. There's a lot of great research around rhodiola, especially as being good for most people or safe for most people as an adaptogen. Ashwagandha is not typically always the best place for certain people. That's why I don't go
Yep.
directly to that. And then I would be remiss if I did not highlight the all-star on the market right now, which is creatine. It is not just for athletes. I think people are learning that, of course, through even just social media, but it's so good for like recycling energy and energy stores in the brain. And it can improve even the same day, like after a bad night's sleep, if you kind of, I don't recommend you high dose it if you've not already like titrated up, because you could have some serious gastrointestinal things happen that you don't want.
Mhm.
But if you are kind of at a place where you can, let's say you're doing 5 or 10 grams a day already, you can even go up to like 20, 25, and it's pretty powerful for
Wow.
offsetting poor sleep. It's
Okay.
pretty magical. But again, please don't just do that off the bat,
Yeah.
because you will not feel good. You'll be probably in the bathroom for a lot of the day. But it is something where it improves, even just doing that like minimum 5 grams per day is a nice supplement for especially midlife women, on top of the fact that it improves all kinds of things in the body, muscle and, just overall, even bone health. So I like, supplements are great, but we do obviously focus on the foundations first. And I look at blood labs to see what else might be important for a supplementation. I just think that, like I just want to say for me, if I don't do my morning where I get my water in and then I get outside and I get a little bit of sunlight and like a little movement, things like that, it's such an important way to set up your day. So figure out what works for your morning. One thing, I mean, add it in. You don't have to make it like 18 steps, but just something that you know is going to make you feel good and like mentally, emotionally feel good as well. And I really think that that's the best place to start. Last thing I want to touch on real quick is the fact that since I've integrated the new calm, I have
Mhm.
noticed such a regulation in not just energy, but almost my mood, yeah, it's new calm. We've talked about before. And if you're interested, someone can reach out to the clinic, but it's something where just that little time of, if you can make the time for it in the morning, the 20 minutes, it's not meditation, but it's this benefit that I haven't experienced from even meditation yet. So I feel like that's a really another thing that, just from a technology standpoint to consider.